Hello everybody, it's Kate here and welcome back to Mosse on a Monday. You know the drill. The last Monday of every month on this YouTube channel, I choose 2 fiction and 2 non-fiction books that I've loved. Taken from my shelves, there's no rhyme or reason to it, just books that I love and I think you might love too. Some are classics, some are recently out, and a couple are yet to be, as it were. One of them today is exactly in that position. So without any further ado, I'm going to kick off with one of my all-time favourite novels, and it is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This, as you can see, is a very old TV tie-in. It was the BBC one that was Joanna David playing the girl. Now, it's so hard when you're describing this novel because obviously I don't want to give anything away. It is kind of a gothic thriller. It is an unnamed narrator, known as usually the girl, even though she's obviously a grown-up woman. And we learn little by little that the story of what happened to her is being told in flashback. And what you need to know is that she is young and she's working as a companion, and she's in Monte Carlo, and she meets a wealthy and very attractive widower, Maxime de Winter. And it's a whirlwind romance, and she accepts his proposal and is taken back to the estate in the West Country in England, Mandalay. And that is the moment at which I suppose the lead character of the novel comes in, and that is Mandalay itself. And I'm sure everybody will know the very, 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 very famous, one of the best first lines in all of literature. Last night I dreamt I went to Mandalay again. It seemed to me I stood by the iron gate leading to the drive, and for a while I could not enter, for the way was barred to me. There was a padlock and a chain upon the gate. Everything about the way the novel unravels is mysterious. So there is a housekeeper, Mrs. Danvers, one of the great imposing, dark and confusing characters in literature. And little by little, we understand that far from being this beautiful, happy, perfect marriage with this beautiful, perfect wife, Rebecca, that things were very, very different from the way that the girl had imagined it. But Mrs. Danvers, if you like, is still there holding a candle to Rebecca. And what seems to have been a tragic accident might have been something else. And little by little we hear the whole of the story in flashback. And one of the key moments is there is a ball at Mandalay, and the girl is dressed by Mrs. Danvers, she later discovers, in the clothes that had belonged to Rebecca. Now, I can't really tell you very much more than that, other than it's a novel about jealousy. It's a novel about the stories we tell about the people that we don't really know them very well, the things that might have happened in their past. We think we know how they would have been, but we don't necessarily know it. It's a story of revenge and actually miscarriage of justice and justice. The twist in this novel is really quite extraordinary, and it's incredibly modern. Rebecca was first published in 1938. It's never been out of print since, but the morality behind the thriller part of the story is still pretty contemporary. And again, I can't tell you any more than that. If you've not read Rebecca, you have the biggest treat in store, and then you'll want to go and read all of Daphne du Maurier. One of the things that I really enjoyed, I'm a writer of fiction that is popular, that readers love, and theatre that readers and audiences love. Quite often the critics at the time are slightly at odds with the people. When the book first came out, the Times reviewed Rebecca as, "The material is of the humblest. Nothing in this is beyond the novelette." And V.S. Pritchard, himself a very fine writer, I would say, said that it was a book that would be here today and gone tomorrow. Been in print since 1938 and has sold millions and millions of copies. And I mention it just because I would say there's something quite important about du Maurier, her as a female writer, writing dark stories, which now would be called psychological thrillers, and it's a huge genre. But quite often the stories that women tell about women are dismissed. They are not seen as literature, they are not seen as important. And male critics, almost entirely male critics, dismiss them. And the only answer to that, book sales. So please do that Times stupid review a favour and go out and buy your own copy. There's many classic editions of Rebecca. I'm recommending the Virago Modern Classics edition, and I've got my old Pan edition, which is a tie-in. Many of you will have only seen it from the Hitchcock film, but believe me, the book itself is beautifully written and a complete thrill. My second choice today, and my first non-fiction choice, is a book that is not out until the end of June. So I'm afraid I've got, you can see a really roughshod proof, but it's a non-fiction book called Blood, Fire and Gold, the story of Elizabeth I and Catherine de' Medici, and it's written by Estelle Paranque. Now, many of you who read my historical fiction will know that I've been writing a series of books called The Burning Chambers, which is set against the backdrop of the French Wars of Religion in the 16th century. But one of the things that is so significant about 16th century history is that there are some towering female leaders, not just in one country, but in several countries. And I have read so much about Catherine de' Medici and so much about Elizabeth I, obviously because it's the period of time I'm writing about in The City of Tears and The Burning Chambers and moving on. But this new non-fiction book, it really blew me away. And the reason is because, again, linking to what I was just saying about women writing about other women, there is a lens on these two incredibly well-recorded women, two of the most recorded women in history, but that puts the humanity back at the heart of it, the fact that they were women and how much extra they had to do to remain safe, to try to control their own lives, to try to be the leaders they wanted to be, with attempts at every moment to destabilise them. Now, one of the things when you're looking back in history you have to guard against is whether you like somebody. And I want you to try to forget that, because it doesn't matter whether we like Catherine de' Medici or whether we like Elizabeth I. What matters is that we honour what they did and what they achieved. So this book is, if you like, the story of their 30-year friendship, rivalry, affection, dislike, distrust. Catherine de' Medici, the elder of the two, born in 1519 and she died in 1589. And she was quite extraordinary through her marriage and particularly through the number of children that she had. She ruled by being a mother and a wife, if you like. She came from Italy, of course, in the first instance. Her husband was unfaithful to her. She had to put up enormously with his mistress being much more powerful than she was, but she always just stuck to it, which was extraordinary. And she did through manipulating her sons, all of them, and then finally lost control in 1589 when she died, but she had seen all of her sons killed. And in the end, the great Huguenot king, Henry of Navarre, become king. Henry had been married to her daughter, but that marriage had not worked out. But she was an extraordinary woman. Almost all the things that we know about her have been written by male historians describing her as aggressive, violent, manipulative, dangerous. All the words if applied to a male leader, which would be strong and ambitious and firm and strategic. These are the words. Elizabeth I of England made a very different decision. The daughter, of course, of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, his second of 6 wives. She was partly a favourite and then she was out of favour. She was brought up away from her parents. Obviously her mother was executed. She had a very complicated relationship with her half-sister Mary Tudor, and an affectionate relationship with her little brother who died very quickly, Edward VI. But Elizabeth made a different choice. And all the way through this wonderful book by Estelle Paranque, you start to see how many times she had to say, no, I'm not marrying this person, I'm not being married off to that person. It's very depressing that when you go onto the internet to look up Elizabeth I, the first 4 questions are, did Elizabeth I marry? Did Elizabeth I have a lover? Did Elizabeth I have a child? What about, was she the most powerful ruler that the world had seen of that time? So many of these things have not changed, my friends, but this book will shine a whole new light, not just on court politics in both France and England, but also really what it took for 2 women to admire each other, but mostly be always set against each other as rivals. Elizabeth was born much later, 1533, and she died, of course, in 1603. But as a tribute to 2 extraordinary women, which never becomes sentimental and never tries to eulogise them, looks the people they were dead in the eye, I can't recommend anything more than Blood, Fire and Gold. It's published by Ebury, and it's going to come out at the end of June, so pre-order your copy now. Now, my third choice is actually my second non-fiction, but it leads on so well from what we've just been talking about that I think they sit together. And it's this wonderful book called The Authority Gap by Mary Ann Sieghart, and it came out last year from Doubleday, and it's now just out in paperback. Now, this is one of those books that's really hard to describe, because in a funny sort of way, that if it's the sort of book that you really enjoy reading, which I do, you will fall upon it, you know, like somebody starving in the middle of the desert, or not having any water in the middle of the desert. If you're not somebody who is particularly thinking about how the world works in terms of sexism and the different experiences that women and men had, it might sound a bit dry to you, but bear with me. The reason I've chosen this is that it is a superb analysis of where we are now, what it is like at work, at home, in our structures, in our institutions, that still we have a different experience between what men are doing and are perceived to be doing, and what women are doing and what they are perceived to be doing. And I'm recording this in the light of a piece that appeared in a Sunday newspaper yesterday, essentially criticising a female MP for having legs. There was actually a headline in a British newspaper accusing one of the Labour MPs, Angela Rayner, of deliberately sitting in such a way as to distract the Prime Minister in a, as they put it, you can imagine. But actually, this is why we need books like The Authority Gap, because Mary Ann Sieghart has done extraordinary research. She has done an enormous amount of analysis and data gathering just to show how things still work, and the quiet and unseen sexism that is at play all of the time, and what we should all do to change it, but also why we should change it, because in the end, a sort of misogynistic patriarchy benefits nobody, just a tiny number of people at the top, a tiny number of men at the top. It doesn't benefit men and it doesn't benefit women. So she just says a couple of the key thinking points. For example, when you search Google Images for the word expertise, in the first 20 pictures, there's not a single woman. Despite, shall we say, vaccines, British parents, when asked to estimate their child's IQ, will put their son on average at 115, the average is 100, and their daughter at 107. Boris Johnson was praised for promoting women in his first cabinet, but they still only occupied 8 out of 33 positions. There are only 6 female CEOs of Britain's 100 biggest listed companies, and this is in the context of currently 56 male MPs being investigated for sexual harassment. So I realise it's very hard to say all of these things without people going, oh yeah, no, we know it all. People do know it all, but what are we going to do about it? Well, this book will give you some answers and some suggestions. There are many interviews with some very pioneering women in it: Baroness Hale, Mary Beard, Janet Yelland, Bernadine Evaristo. And in my own particular area of writing and publishing, I just thought it was worth reading out a couple of these kind of things, because the things that Daphne du Maurier was putting up with in 1938, the things that I, as a writer and playwright now, put up with in 2022, what year are we in? 2022, we're still there. These things are endemic and they can be changed. So one of the things that she says in one of the chapters, which is about publishing, is that male reviews, for example, at The Spectator were 4 times more likely to recommend books by other men than books by women. The very, very many fewer female reviewers were even-handed. At the TLS2, men recommended books that were 69% by men and only 31% by women, whereas the female split was 45 to 46. And then some were half and half, did both, not just one or the other. So this book might make you cross, it might make you active, it might make you change your mind, it might make you realise that a lot of the things that happen do not happen by accident, they happen by design. But the one thing it will do is make you think. And I think it's the book that should be given to every young woman and every young man, because we know that there is a much more open way of thinking about things in the generations coming after us. And I have great optimism and great comfort that as long as we've all got the data and we've got the reality of how things are, we can change things. And in the end, that's what books do. Books change people's minds, and when we change our minds, we can make the world a better place and a more welcoming place for everybody. So that is The Authority Gap by Mary Ann Sieghart. Now, my final choice for April's Mosse on a Monday will not surprise you to know is a crime novel, because you will have learnt by now how much I love reading crime fiction, both classic and contemporary. And in my opinion, one of the greatest of the modern contemporary classic crime writers is Anthony Horowitz. And this is a novel called A Line to Kill, and it's the third in his Daniel Hawthorne series. Now, for those of you who have not yet had the treat of reading any of these series, indeed any of Anthony Horowitz, Hawthorne is a slightly irascible, slightly mysterious detective, and he is working with an author called Anthony Horowitz, which hilariously, all the way through the book, he will insist on calling Tony, which he really hates and bridles every moment. And he's written a book, and they decide that they will go to get some publicity for the book to a literary festival, a boutique literary festival on the island of Alderney, which is one of the Channel Islands. Now, this, of course, is a brilliant device, because essentially this turns into what would be called a locked room mystery. The idea that everybody who is involved in the story is in a confined space. Other stories you will have read, of course, set online include Agatha Christie and Then There Were None. So, of course, once everybody's on the island, they're all stuck there. And Alderney, I imagine Horowitz chose it for this reason. There is a sense of it being pre-mobile phones, pre the internet. So everything is about one person having a conversation with somebody else, and then somebody else having a conversation with another person that contradicts the first conversation. And they are there to have the festival, and straight away it's clear there's a lot of tensions. So Le Mesurier, who is a bit of a Jack the Lad wealthy, who is the sponsor of the festival and the progenitor of the festival, if you like, he is a bit of a Marmite person on the island, and it becomes clear straight away that there are huge tensions. There's the idea to put a power line through the island, and some of the residents want it and some of them don't. There are lots of very clever stories about class and occupation, and why some people have to put up with certain sorts of things, and the very rich men that can just go about doing what they want. And of course there's a fabulous cast of other authors, which includes a French performance poet and a celebrity chef and a blind medium. And Horowitz is so witty and so light in the way that he describes people that everybody comes to vivid life. Now, this is not surprising, of course, because Horowitz is the writer of some of the Midsummer Murders, some of the early Poirot, of course, of Foyle's War. He's also a multi-million selling children's author, from Alex Rider, the Diamond Brothers. He's written many other standalone novels, other detective stories, and of course is the one person, the only person, who's been asked to do several continuations of James Bond, and the next James Bond, and the last that he's doing, is coming out in May. So if you've never read Horowitz before, what are you going to get? You're going to discover a proper old-fashioned detective story with plenty of clues, character-led, amazing atmosphere, clever and witty, but you can solve it. You can be one step ahead. There's a very light humour throughout, which is one of the things that makes these books so distinctive. And I promise you, the twist is great. I can't tell you what it is, obviously, because I would spoil it. And when you've adored A Line to Kill, you'll be able to go back and read the first two Hawthorne, and then you'll be able to go back and read all of the Bonds and all of the Moonflower books, and a couple of standalone, like The House of Silk, which is a wonderful sort of gothic detective story, I would say. So you can see, I can't recommend it enough. A Line to Kill, it came out from Cornerstone last year and will be out in paperback relatively soon, but you've got plenty of time to get yourself going. And as they say, this wonderful strap line, on a small island, everyone's a suspect. So that's it for April. I'll be back again on the last Monday of May with another 4 selections of books that I love, taken from my bookshelves. But for now, don't forget, it doesn't matter what you're reading, just enjoy it. Bye for now.